Thank you for joining us today on The Line of Fire. Michael Brown, delighted to be with you. Welcome to all of our new first-time listeners. So glad to have you with us. I consider it a privilege to be with you on the air here 5 days a week. There's so many other things you could be listening to. Thanks for taking time to tune into this broadcast. It is my heartfelt goal, our whole team, our prayer, is that every single day you will be infused with faith and truth and courage to help you stand strong on the front lines. No reason for us to be cowering, no reason for us running to hide, no reason for us capitulating, caving in. We are standing on the truth, and the truth will set people free, and the truth is the ultimate expression of God's love. Because he loves us, he tells us the truth, and that truth will transform us. Friends, we want to infuse you with faith, truth, and courage every single month. Be sure to sign up for the Frontline newsletter if you're not getting it now. The testimonies, the messages, the Hebrew word study, excerpts from our books, all for free. You just read on your cell phone, read on your computer. It's digital every month. Go to the website now, thelineoffire.org, thelineoffire.org. Sign up. The moment you do, we'll also send you the previous Frontline newsletter so you don't have to wait for the next one to come so you can dive in. And I can see your smiles as you're reading. You know, people have said to me over the years, Dr. Brown, we can hear your smile over the air. And it is. I've been on First Live Daily Talk Radio since 2008. And then more recently with our new 30-minute equipping broadcast, the one you're listening to now, that by God's grace, we will blanket the nation with this broadcast and help bring health and vitality and strength to the body. And out of that, out of a revived church, see a gospel-based moral and cultural revolution. Friends, it's not too late. America can be visited. America can be changed. And then our ultimate goal of our ministry, the 3 R's, revival in the church, a gospel-based moral and cultural revolution, and then the redemption of Israel. A healthy church bringing healthy change to the society. A healthy church provoking Israel to envy. Oh, yeah. And we are not afraid to dive into the controversies. Listen, I understand your average pastor or Christian leader will not spend as much time as we are on these critically important issues. But we've got to talk about them. This is the world we live in. And when churches have asked me to come in, Dr. Brown, can you teach on Can You Be Gay and Christian or the Christians and the culture wars? Can you talk about these things? When I do, if I'm available for Q&A afterwards or to talk with people maybe at our book table, folks who come up wanting to talk, there's always a long line of people, inevitably many of them standing there weeping, and they've got to tell their story. Later this month, as we get into some of the cultural issues, we're looking more first at what the Word says, and we're going to go from there to the cultural issues and how we handle them and how do we respond. I'll share some of these stories with you, but I don't need to share them with many of you because that's what you're living through. That's where you are right now. Your church denomination is now compromising on these issues, saying that we will bless committed same-sex unions. Or your 15-year-old daughter just came out and said, Mom, Dad, I'm lesbian, and I'm in a relationship, and I want you to know that. Or your 18-year-old son says, I don't agree with you guys anymore. I think the Bible's outdated and wrong, and I'm going to stand with my gay friends. Or your spouse has said, I've had this secret battle for years, but I'm actually trans, and I want a divorce. And that's the world you're living in right now. Or you yourself are struggling. What do I do? I love Jesus. I believe the word's clear, but I'm really attracted to the same sex. I've got no interest in the opposite sex. Does that mean I'm condemned to hell? Does that mean God hates me? Does that mean I could never have a romantic or physical relationship my entire life? Is that what it means to follow Jesus? Maybe you're listening and you're like, Dr. Brown, you have no idea what it's like to be trapped in the wrong body. You've never had to deal with that a second in your life. You can't possibly identify. You're correct. I can't identify. I can't. But I can pray for compassion, and I can pray for insight, and I can pray for ways to minister God's grace to each of you that right now you are hurting, you are in pain. So let's start again with the Word of God, because as Hebrews 4:12 tells us, and we looked at last week, it's the Word of God which is living and active and separates between soul and spirit, joints and marrow, and is a discerner of the thoughts and intents of the heart. So, as we're going through the Word of God, what does the Bible say about homosexual practice? We go to one of the best-known passages in the Bible about this, Leviticus 18:22, and then Leviticus chapter 20, verse 13. So Leviticus 18:22 says this, and again, this may be the best-known verse in the Bible about homosexual practice. Do not lie with a male as one lies with a woman. It is detestable. Or in King James, it is an abomination. Now, many have heard that. Many same-sex attracted people have heard those words and heard the Bible saying to them, you are an abomination. Not the act of homosexual practice, not the act of a man lying with a man. And then we'll see in Romans when we get to that, Paul applies it to a woman lying with a woman having sex with a woman. But very explicitly here, very explicitly, it is called detestable, that act of a man having sex with another man. Does that mean that you yourself are an abomination in God's sight if you are simply same-sex attracted? No, the same-sex attraction is wrong, just like for a married man to be attracted to another woman is wrong. But that doesn't mean that you yourself are an abomination. So don't hear the Word of God saying that. You may have heard Christians say that, but that's not what the Word of God says, and that's not what the gospel says. According to the gospel, all have sinned and fallen short of God's glory. All are worthy of damnation and judgment, but God's mercy is for all and to all through the cross. You say, all right, how do gay theologians and their allies respond to this? And how do they answer this? It's so straightforward. Okay, first question. Do you as a Christian follow the dietary laws? I would assume most of you don't. I would assume most of you as Christians have no problem maybe eating a ham sandwich or getting pepperoni pizza or maybe wonton soup that's got pork in there or having shrimp or lobster or something like that. So why on earth is it okay for you to do that? I imagine most Christian men are not leaving their beards unshaven, right? And Leviticus plainly says, Leviticus 11, also Deuteronomy 14, explicitly say that it's detestable to eat these unclean foods. And then Leviticus 19 says that men are not to shave the corners of their beards and things like that. So you're being a hypocrite. Now, a lot of Christians don't have an answer, so what they do is they just quote Leviticus 18:22 more loudly. Well, let's sort that out first. In order for God to keep Israel separate from the nations, he gave Israel certain requirements, like the dietary laws, like the law about sowing two different kinds of seed in the same field, like the law about wearing two different types of fabrics in your garments. These were laws that inherently were not moral laws. In other words, it is not inherently sinful to eat pork. It is not, there may be health issues with it, but in terms of actually eating it, if you ate it and didn't know what it was, it would not spiritually defile you, right? In the same way, it does not spiritually defile a man if he shaves his beard. It does not spiritually defile a farmer if they plant two different kinds of seeds in the same field. It does not spiritually defile a woman if she's wearing garments made of two different types of fabrics. These were laws that were simply given to keep Israel from the nations, and some of the dietary laws could have been health-related as well. There are other laws that God gave to Israel because they are based on universal moral principles. All right? So two different sets of laws, all included together in the Torah, side by side, without distinction. Some laws given simply to keep Israel separate from the nations, other laws based on universal moral principles. For example, when God told Israel, Lo tirtzach, you shall not murder, that was not just for them. Murder was universally wrong for all. For example, Genesis 9:6 says, whoever sheds man's blood, by man shall his blood be shed, for he was created in the image of God. So murder is universally wrong for all people. God could judge the Canaanites for murder. God could judge the Moabites or the Egyptians for murder. Murder is universally wrong. When God says, lo tin'af, don't commit adultery in the Ten Commandments, or lo tignov, don't steal in the Ten Commandments, those are wrong for all people. That's why in the Old Testament, the prophets also proclaimed judgments on the nations. They proclaim judgments. For example, read Amos, the first chapter into the beginning of the second chapter, where God pronounces judgment on the people of Damascus and the people of Gaza and so on. He does this. Why? Because they were guilty of covenant breaking with one another. They were guilty of committing atrocities against one another. So these are sins for the entire human race. And God judges those sins of the entire human race because they are universal moral principles, right? However, God does not judge the people of Damascus or the people of Moab, does not judge them for the dietary laws. Or God does not say, I'm going to judge you because you sowed two different kinds of seed in your field. So how do you know which is which? How do you know which is a universal moral prohibition? And how do you know which is just for Israel? Well, it's easy. The Bible tells us. You say, I thought you said the laws are given side by side without distinction. Yeah, God does not say, okay, this law is just for Israel, this law is for everybody. Right? He doesn't say that in every single case. Right? When he says don't murder, he doesn't say, by the way, that's for everybody. Right? But if you'll read through the whole of the Bible, then you'll see that ultimately there were laws that God gave to Israel only for Israel. And it'll say this is for you. Ultimately, when you read it through, not just one verse, but the whole context, okay, these are your dietary laws. These things are unclean for you. But God doesn't judge the nations of the world for those things as you keep reading the Bible. So when God says, I'm judging everybody for this, now you know it is a universal moral prohibition. Or if it's repeated in the New Testament as binding on all believers, now you know this is a universal moral prohibition. But when it's just for Israel in the Old Testament, the other nations are not judged for it, it's not repeated in the New Testament for everybody, then you know for sure that this was just for Israel. So the question, Leviticus 18, is this a universal moral prohibition or is it just for Israel? We answer that on the other side of the break. Check out this important announcement.
Staying active is essential for your well-being. Whether you're at the gym, strolling in the park, or enjoying hobbies, every step counts because movement is life. I'm Paul, a board-certified doctor of holistic health, and I want to introduce you to Trivita's Beetroot Gummies. Packed with nitrates, these gummies enhance vasodilation, giving you the boost you need to stay active. The natural power of beetroot supports energy, stamina, and healthy blood pressure. So whether you're gardening, dancing, or enjoying time outdoors, Trivita's Beetroot Gummies keep you energized. Don't let fatigue hold you back. Experience the energy-boosting, on-the-go benefits of Trivita's Beetroot Gummies today. Embrace life's opportunities to move and thrive with Trivita's Beetroot Gummies.
Order today and use promo code BROWN25 to receive 25% off your order. As a new customer, 100% of the proceeds from your first order will go to support the Line of Fire radio broadcast. So call now, 1-800-771-5584, 1-800-771-5584, or online at Trivita.com.
Welcome back, friends, to the Line of Fire broadcast. If you're just tuning in, be sure to get our frontline edifying, how else do I describe it? Inspiring, informative, all the above and more. Our frontline newsletter, sign up at thelineoffire.org and tell your friends to get it as well. All right, Leviticus 18. Is this a universal moral prohibition? When God says to the Israelites, a man shall not lie with a man, as a man lies with a woman. It is detestable. It's an abomination. Is that universal for everyone, or is that just for Israel, no different than the dietary laws? It is a universal moral prohibition. How do we know it? Well, first we keep reading from Leviticus 18:1, which says, don't do what the nations do, right? So don't do what they're doing. But then when you get down to the end, look at this, Leviticus 18, beginning in verse 24. Leviticus 18, beginning verse 24. Do not defile yourselves in any of those ways, for it is by such that the nations I'm casting out before you defile themselves. Thus the land became defiled, and I called it to account for its iniquity, and the land spewed out its inhabitants. So this is a universal moral prohibition. What else do you find in Leviticus 18? Mainly prohibitions against incest. So I have a question for every gay theologian, every professing gay Christian, every ally. Why is it biblically wrong for two adult brothers who are same-sex attracted to be together? So we're talking about something consensual. We're not talking about an abusive relationship. Why is that wrong according to the Bible? Or for two adult sisters who are same-sex attracted to be with each other? Why is that incestuous relationship forbidden by the Bible? Forget what the law says. And there are some countries that have relaxed some of their incest laws, by the way. But based on the Bible, why is that wrong? If you want to throw out all of Leviticus 18 and say that was just for ancient Israel, well, then why is all incest? We're not just talking about something where a father takes advantage of a child. What about two grown adults who are same-sex attracted so that they can't physically procreate? There can't be a problem with a child that they would produce, as there often would be in an incestuous relationship, like a brother and sister or something like that. That can't happen, right? Why is it wrong biblically? Biblically, why is it wrong? If you want to throw this out, why is it wrong? Yeah, I haven't gotten an answer to that question yet, because there isn't. Because if you throw it out, there is no other biblical foundation for it. God judged the Canaanites for these things. The land spewed out the Canaanites because of these sins. Adultery is another one listed. Bestiality is another one listed. So explicitly, and read right to the end of the chapter, verse 28, so let not the land spew you out for defiling it as it spewed out the nations that came before you. They did, it says they did all these abhorrent things. In Hebrew, it's the plural of toevah, all these toevot, all these detestable things they did. And that's why they were spewed out. And a man lying with a man is considered to be a detestable thing in a list of detestable things because it's so contrary to God's order and plan. It's so contrary to what he intended, no matter how much people love each other. So this is not just something for Israel like the food laws. If you read Leviticus 11, you read Deuteronomy 14, some of the passages says these things are unclean for you. Right? So you're not allowed to. God's not talking about someone else living in another part of the world that's not part of Israel, but for you, forbidden. So that argument goes out the window. Goodbye. You cannot use that argument. This is a universal moral prohibition according to Leviticus. You say, no. Dr. Brown, you're missing the whole point. You have all these laws, including adultery and things like that, right up to verse 20. Then verse 21, do not allow any of your offspring to be offered up to Molech, and do not profane the name of the Lord your God. I am the Lord. Now verse 22, do not lie with a male as one lies with a woman, as it abhorrence. You see, Dr. Brown, what you're missing here is that this is now bringing in the subject of idolatry. And in ancient Israel and the ancient Near East, you had temples where you had sacred prostitutes, male and female, and men could be with men. You had these male prostitutes in the temple, and the same thing in the Greco-Roman world. That's what's being forbidden. Not two men loving each other, not two men committed to each other. That's not what's being forbidden here. What's being forbidden, rather, is temple prostitution in the context of the worship of Molech. Well, hang on. Let's look at verse 23. Do not have carnal relations with any beast and defile yourself thereby, and let no woman lend herself to a beast to mate with it. It is perversion. So you telling me that it's only perversion to commit bestiality if it's if it's in conjunction with idolatrous worship, because that's the very next verse. Well, no one in their right mind is going to argue that bestiality is perverse in its very nature on every level, unimaginably perverse. So, no, that argument goes out the window for verse 22 as well. No, hang on. You're missing the point. The Hebrew word toivah does not mean something that is morally repulsive, but rather something that is just ritually or culturally repulsive. Like the children of Israel were told when they came into Egypt, Joseph told his brothers, don't say you're shepherds because that's a toivah. That's detestable to the Egyptians. Yes, sometimes toivah can mean something that is simply culturally detestable or ritually detestable. But here it's telling you in context, all these things are detestable to the point of the land spewing out the inhabitants. This is detestable the same way adultery is. This is detestable the same way that bestiality is, the same way that adultery is. These things cross lines in God's sight. And the word toivah could also be used for something morally detestable, like Proverbs 6. There's 6 things the Lord hates, 7 that are detestable, abominations to him. And then it goes and lists them. It includes murder in that list. Dr. Brown, you're missing the point. This is about promiscuous sex. This is about just a man lying with another man. It's not about 2 men that love each other and are committed to each other. Can't you see that? Well, show me anything in the Bible, where if you commit the same sin over and over with the same person and you love that person, it's no longer a sin. No, it doesn't change the nature of it. And there is a reason that God has this prohibition. It's for ultimately our own good. And that's why it's the only sin in Leviticus mentioned as a toivah, something detestable, that also carries the death penalty. Explicitly singled out. There's the general list of toivot, detestable things in this whole chapter, but it's the only one singled out as a toivah within the chapter, which is then punishable by death in Leviticus 20. And you're saying there should be a death penalty? No, not for a split second. No more than I'm saying there should be a death penalty today for breaking the Sabbath, but that was Israel's law. Or death penalty for adultery. That was Israel's law. That was under the Sinai covenant, the death penalty. But it's showing how wrong it was. And we see that once you sanction this and give it the go-ahead and give it approval, it affects, through an agenda, a whole society as we're witnessing today. All right, so much more to dig into in the scriptures here. You'll find everything in even greater depth, with references, with counter-arguments, with answers in my book, Can You Be Gay and Christian? Responding with love and truth to questions about homosexuality. This is Dr. Michael Brown. Thanks so much for tuning in. Just a reminder that we are listener-supported. If we have been a blessing to you, if you're being enriched in the word and prayer in your own walk with God through this broadcast, then stand with us so that we can reach many, many more and bless many, many more. Together, friends, we're making a difference. So go to thelineoffire.org, thelineoffire.org, and click donate.